Hello, my name is Cameron Wood, and I'm going to be interviewing Percival Hornak for my podcast today. Percy is a dramaturg, and so I asked him a couple questions about that. This interview was pretty interesting to do because it gave a helpful insight to what dramaturgy kind of looks like for him. So I hope you enjoy. So this interview is mainly going to be about uh, changes in like the theater scene in a post-pandemic world, well, post-pandemic, and how it's like sort of affected voices of marginalized groups of people. So in general, how has dramaturgy in theater changed at all, if at all, in a post-pandemic world? So I feel like we obviously know like how it's changed like during the pandemic, but sort of as the pandemic is like slowly like more and more people are starting to work like in person. How has that like changed dramaturgy?
I think the biggest change for me in my dramaturgical practice is that the question of why are we here in person to watch this play has become more important than ever. I think more and more it's really, really important to be able to say dramaturgically, like, why are people coming here physically to see this thing, and what experience are they having that is tied to physically being here in person in this place. I think the other thing that is related less to like pandemic restrictions or like things like that, like less related to the actual pandemic, but more related to the ways that our industry has changed because of the uprising that happened during the pandemic, is that dramaturgs have always been advocates. We've always been positioned really well to be facilitators or to be in a position where we're like moderating or making sure that different groups can talk to each other within the rehearsal process. But I think more and more dramaturgs, particularly thinking about being advocates for the audience, have been put in a position where like we are best positioned to think about how are we representing certain communities, how are we speaking to certain communities, who is our audience, what are we trying to say, and then also from like a disability justice perspective too, how are we keeping our audiences safe when we're bringing them to the theater, both mentally and physically, like how are we
Yeah.
keeping them safe from coronavirus.
All right, awesome. You kind of touched on this just a little bit, but the second question was, how have you personally seen these changes affect intersectional voices in theater?
I think the biggest change that I've seen is that in addition to dramaturgs being asked or sort of put in a position of needing to advocate more, people are a lot more open about self-advocacy. Like I think and this has been my experience personally and a lot of people that I know as well, like there's sort of like a it has never been clearer that the theater industry cares more about money than people's lives. It's been really clear through the pandemic like what theaters are really interested in, like let's take care of our artists and provide opportunities for our artists, and what theaters are like, we have this building that's really nice and we care a lot about our building. But there's been an uptick in like artists who are able to be like, oh, you are not treating me well as a person of color, as a trans person, as a queer person, as a disabled person, and I won't work for you anymore. So I think we've sort of moved towards like theater workers recognizing their power in a way that is really exciting.
I feel like people like learning to self-advocate more often. I feel like it also applies like outside of like even theater at all, because like I've been hearing like a lot of people like they advocate for themselves more often and like yeah, just not really put up with like poor working conditions. So it's interesting to hear like how that kind of translates into dramaturgy. Yeah, so we can move on to the last question now, which is, are you happy with your efforts so far to commit to intersectionality in the theater?
Um, I feel like I could always be doing more. Like I think everybody could always be doing more, but the point that I've reached as an out trans artist is that like the thing that I care about is um advocating for my community, making sure that like I am representing my community accurately and being in community with people who are also trans, and sort of figuring out like dealing with all of the ways that intersectionality
Yeah.
um, manifests in that community, and the ways that we can all support each other across differences that we have unrelated to like our gender identity, is the thing that I've really tried to put my energy into. In some ways, I feel like I have done that by focusing in really specifically on like the community that I feel the community that's important to me.
Yeah.
So that's sort of where I've been putting a lot of my energy.
Well, all right. That's pretty much all the questions I have here. Short interview, but it was really it was really insightful.
Yeah, great. Thank you for reaching out. And
Yeah.
I hope you have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you so much for doing this interview.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Bye, Cameron.
All right. See ya.